and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and well. We've got two games to talk about. We've had a game today. Of course, we're recording this on Sunday evening that, to be honest, we could have dedicated a full podcast to alone, but we have two games to discuss. Nathan, I'm going to ask if you're okay. I'm sure if I'd asked you probably a few hours ago, your mind or head or whatever you want to call it would have been just as much on Mars as what mine would. Have you calmed down? Because it's very rare that we actually record kind of hours after full time. And given the events of this afternoon, are you feeling level-headed? Are you feeling like you want to smash your laptop up? Or are you quite content given the kind of tone of last week's podcast?
I'm pretty content, Chris. Yeah, I think my heart rate might have increased substantially in the final 20 minutes of that game. But yeah, I'm all right. I think it's been a pretty good week for us, all things considered. We spoke last week about needing a reaction and needing positive results this week. And I think that once you take a little bit of context out of both results, you see 4 points on the board from 6, and you sort of look at that and think, yeah, that's a pretty good return considering the week and the two fixtures that we've had. So yeah, I look forward to dissecting this one with you.
I'm glad your head's leveled because I'm still. I don't know, Nathan. Let's just talk about Wednesday night because I needed a bit of additional time before I begin to think about what just occurred after being 3-1 up. So, Nathan, going into Wednesday night, the main talking point, we discussed it on the last podcast. We were even asked about it in the fan panel for the Gazette this week. Basically, what does Michael Carrick do to get his forward line scoring or performing in better form, I guess, really? And the main kind of talking point, as well as Finn Azaz, I guess they were both part of the conversation, was will he stick with Azaz and Latte-Lath, or will we see the introduction of a Tommy Conway, of a Marcus Forss, of a Bergzorg, and we'll see Latte-Lath taken out of the team, given his, at that stage, goalless run. And actually, Michael Carrick stuck with Finn Azaz, but went with Tommy Conway up front instead of Latte-Lath. And that was really kind of the headline from that game. There wasn't the changes that we anticipated in defence. We thought that Matt Clark might come back into the team. I don't think anyone's head would have really been too shocked if that had have happened. There was no changes in midfield, although Johnny Howson was back in the squad, which was obviously great to see. But yeah, the main changes were, of course, Riley McGree come back into the team on the left ahead of Micah Hamilton. But the standout narrative and headline, if you want to call it that, was, of course, that Latte-Lath come out of the team. I guess now, with the benefit of hindsight, the correct decision. But at the time, if we take it back to prior to kickoff, an hour before, we were ready to watch Chris Wilder's Sheffield United potentially inflict even more pain on us. At that time, what were your thoughts on Michael Carrick's bold call to go without Latte-Lath?
I think that it was the correct decision, if I'm honest. We discussed it last week and you asked me what team that I would go with. I said that I'd drop Latte-Lath, but I didn't think that Michael Carrick would. He proved me wrong, did do that, and I thought that it was probably fair based on what we'd seen from Latte-Lath. His finishing in the weeks previous to this fixture was just erratic. The Bristol City chance that we discussed at length last week was unforgivable. I don't know how you couldn't put that one on target. And Tommy Conway just come back from injury, so he hasn't even had the option to use him necessarily from the start, having only trained a couple of times before the Bristol City game and only being used as a sub in that one. So yeah, I thought that it was probably fair. Carrick obviously just mentioned that this was freshening the team up because Latte-Lath and Mike Hamilton had played loads of games despite there only being one. after an international break. But yeah, I thought that it was a fair change, and obviously McGree coming in as well was one that we discussed last week and said would need to happen. And yeah, it made us look a better side as a whole. Really, I thought that in the early stages of the first half against Sheffield United that we struggled to get into the game. Really, we couldn't really get the ball off them. They didn't create a whole load until we started to grow into the game, and then they attacked us, counter-attacked us, and Raksaki had a really good chance. Luke Ayling cleared that one off the line. And yeah, we didn't create a whole load ourselves in that first half, although towards the end of it, we were definitely growing and were probably the better side going into half time.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment completely. And to be honest, I think it took Ayling's goal line clearance to really wake us up into the game, to be honest. I fully agree with you in the sense that we didn't really start well. It wasn't a terrible start by any means, but it seemed a little bit slow, a little bit laboured, a little bit lethargic. Sheffield United, for one, I just want to point out that I thought Kiefer Moore was absolutely dreadful on the night. He gave Sheffield United absolutely nothing going forward. And look, I know he scored one goal for them this season, but I think bearing in mind that they were without, for the majority of the game, Gus Hamer, who's undoubtedly their star player, they had kind of everything in their setup, and they were without Sousa as well in midfield, who would normally partner Arblaster. But I thought they looked probably the best side that we've played this season in that first half. And not to the extent of they blew me away. They definitely didn't. But there was an obvious sort of increase in the quality levels, I felt. I don't know about you. Just in terms of individual quality, they look quite assured in their back line. They knocked the ball about really well. Arblaster, although he wasn't it wasn't a performance where you take him back and you think, wow, what a player they've got on their hands. It was more so he just kept the ball ticking for them, seems to make the right decision more often than not. And yeah, I must say, given that kind of everything that Middlesbrough fans label Chris Wilder as one-dimensional, can only play with the three centre halves, that's been quite the transformation in terms of their setup and their style. And I thought that Raksaki looked probably arguably their brightest player as well. And to be fair, as I say, it was his effort that Ayling does incredibly well to clear off the line that actually woke us up a little bit. And as you say, although we didn't from then on kind of have a spurn of chances in the kind of closing minutes of the first half, we definitely did wake up a little bit. And I think that kind of continued into the second half, really.
Yeah. I think even going into the second half, really, we didn't create bag loads of chances or good ones at that. One that stands out is one that we worked to Tommy Conway that was blocked just as he was about to make it looked like a goal, really. But I think it was Sutar got in the way of it just on the 6 yard box. And then, yeah, Conway ran his race, really. Lath comes on with 15 minutes to go. And lo and behold, two players that we bashed last week in Finazaz and Lath combine for the goal. Finazaz does really well not to play the initial pass in which Lath's already made a run and is offside. Lath does well to get back on and then make another run in between Sutar and Gilchrist. Riley McGree's alongside Gilchrist as well, which sort of puts him in two minds whether to go with Lath and come round on the cover with him or go with McGree. Instead, he does neither, really. And Azaz just puts a ball right on Lath's bonce, and he does really well to direct it into the corner and beyond Cooper. And yeah, it was a nice moment, I think. You could see the sort of relief from everyone that the striker that we've sort of put a lot of pressure on this season to shoulder the burden of scoring all of our goals, really, who hasn't been doing that finally sort of shake that burden off his back a little bit. And yeah, there was a release of emotion for him. I think that he possibly went the wrong way around it, really, with his sort of celebration. I think he needs to relax that. If he can't hit the target from 5 yards, fair enough. His header was great. But yeah, the top and bottom of it is we were very, very glad to get that goal. Two players that it hasn't fell for. It fell for in this instance. And yeah, from then on, it just felt like you had to maybe weather a little bit of a storm. Look, they had one chance towards the end in which Hamer played a ball down the line and the ball was crossed across the face of goal. Edmondson did really well to flick it over our own crossbar, or else Brewster had a tap in. And yeah, it was nice. 1-0 over Sheffield United. Wilder sent pack in. Ideal.
Yeah, yeah, and I just want to touch on the goal again. Obviously, as you say, there's a few different parts to this. There's the part of Finn Azaz in the goal, which, in fairness to him, I think anyone that listens to this podcast probably knows I haven't been his biggest fan for a period now. I can obviously see the kind of conversation around him, and I understand both points of view because Finn Azaz is one of those players, and I'm all for it. In a 4-2-3-1, there's a huge, huge creative burden on the number 10 to produce passes, goals, assists, key passes, whatever. Basically, just moments in games that are going to effectively either score you a goal or get you in a really good position to create a good chance. And Finn Azaz, he has so many times kind of over the past few months, in fairness to him, sometimes been let down from the likes of Emmanuel Latilaf, but also in the same breath, there's many times where he dilly-dallies on the ball, or he probably, instead of passing, will chop back and forwards multiple times and get a shot off, and it's not a good shot. And the frustration comes from there. With Finn Azaz, he probably does 3 great things in a game and 15 bad things. Now, depending on the way that you view football, some people probably think, well, you need Finn Azaz in the team for those 3 great things. And I understand that completely because, you know, we were kind of crying out for McGree to come back into the team. That lessens the burden on Azaz. And we saw that on Wednesday night. It quite clearly helps him out because even in a positional sense, because of the positions that Riley McGree picks up and the people that follow him. I mean, there was one time on Wednesday night where obviously we know that Riley McGree plays from the left, but he had floated out to the right-hand side and was picking passes and trying to create from the opposite side, leaving a huge gap on the other side for Finn Azaz to occupy, for Borges to occupy. I think there's definitely a case, and I completely agree with the sentiment that Finn Azaz benefits just like kind of everyone else in the team, really, when Riley McGree's in that side alongside him. But going back to my point of kind of the viewpoint of whether having Finn Azaz in the team is a must or we could do better or we could find better. I think my only criticism of him is for those kind of, let's say, 10 or 15 moments where he perhaps doesn't make the pass or takes a shot on when he should pass. You kind of just, at least for myself, I probably have a little bit more of an expectation on him. And that might be just wrongful levels of expectation because of what he did last season, given his start at Plymouth. But I think in a team, in a position that we are, the 10 and 9 in our team need to be scoring an awful lot of the goals. And unfortunately, or not necessarily even scoring, creating a lot of the goals. And this season, we've seen Finn Azaz contribute by all means, give people chances. But I think up until Wednesday night, him and Latilaf had combined for 3 goal contributions, and all of which, none of which were from open play up until Wednesday, funnily enough. But as a whole, I think Finn Azar's he's going to be one of those players, whether kind of we like it or we don't, where for the remainder of this season, he's going to divide opinion. It's going to be I know Marcus Tavernier is a very different player, but it's going to be that kind of ilk of conversation where it's basically going to be 50-50 all year, where he'll have some games where he does something and you think, wow, what a player we've got. He'll do other things in games where you think he shouldn't even be in the squad. It's that simple. But I guess my hope is that Finn Azaz, and like he has today in fairness, which we'll get onto, just goes on and improves his output, because it's obvious to see he's got moments within him. I just want to see more moments, and hopefully, as I say, that will click into place and he'll continue to improve on that. With Latilaf, we kind of had the conversation last week, but just kind of, I know I've gone off on a right tangent there, but regarding the goal, it's a wonderful pass from Azaz. It's a brilliant header from Latilaf. And like we touched on last week, doesn't have a lot of time to think about it. He basically just thinks, I've got to get this header on target. And he puts it in the perfect place. Anything that went in the back of the net would have been perfect, but he literally puts it in the perfect place in the back of the net. The Sheffield United goalkeeper, Cooper, stands no chance. It's almost like a kind of sympathetic dive, almost, just to make the Sheffield United fans think he's tried to save it, but there's no chance of him saving that. And then just touching on the celebration, as you say, for those that didn't see it or didn't know what Nathan was referring to, he basically kind of signaled or gestured towards both of his ears the kind of motion of like chatter almost. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see my hands going. But for audio listeners, like the kind of signal of your hands that you would imagine if someone said, stop chatting. And he kind of did that. Whether you want to look at it as though he's saying there's been lots of talk and I've answered your question, or if he's kind of doing it from an ego perspective of, you shouldn't all be talking about me because, look, this is what I can do. Either way, to be honest, I don't know why he's done the celebration. I don't get me wrong, I was absolutely delighted with the goal. It's a great goal. It's a great header and everything that goes with it and the result. But that just annoyed me a little bit. I thought, in all honesty, mate, you've gone 10 games, I think, without a goal. You're not really in a position to be kind of given sort of hand signals to anyone or to the crowd as if to kind of allude to the talk about your performances, because quite frankly, they haven't been good enough all season. By all means, I'm sure it was frustration and in the spur of the moment and all the adrenaline, I kind of accept why it might have happened, but I really just, I thought it made him look a little bit silly in it. I don't know why he's done it, but yeah, I don't want to get too drawn on that, to be honest. In terms of the result, as you say, it sent Chris Wilder packing. That was the main thing. In all honesty, post-match, as much as I was delighted, he was very complimentary of us. And I must say, Sheffield United, I actually think if they can improve on their squad as a whole in January, they'll be right up there, because they've got some real good players. And in fairness to Chris Wilder, and I really didn't want to say this, but in fairness to him, he's managed to put together a team with not necessarily a limited budget. I'm sure it's a lot bigger than some of the budgets in this league, but given the mess that they were in and some of the players that they've lost, he's kind of got it to a functional point that actually you could quite well see them challenging. And it's not three at the back with wing backs. It's actually just a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, fair enough to him keeping a £15 million player on the bench on Tuesday night or Wednesday night. Brewster 25, but like anyway, by the by, I don't really care about Sheffield United. They got sent packing. I haven't won on Teesside in 26 years as well, by the way.
Didn't know that.
So there you go. Yeah, and it gave us all a little bit of a feel-good feeling going into the rest of the week. A strange one with us playing on Sunday this week. A torrid one, actually, thinking about the journey down to Norwich. I've done that twice it's horrific. Just country roads for miles and miles and miles. And then all of a sudden you just hit a city, which is Norwich. And yeah, we'll have to get onto it now, Chris. I think you've had your half an hour to sort of relax
Yeah,
and
I was just, to be honest, I was just absolutely waffling about Finn Azaz for about 10 minutes, it felt like. But I think subconsciously in my head, I was just hoping that we didn't have to go on to this game. And don't get me wrong, as I've seen a lot of on social media, there's plenty of positives to take and there's some really nice moments in the game. But the fact that we've thrown away 2 points is just infuriating. It really is.
yeah, it is. It is. We'll get into it anyway. First of all, one change to the team on Wednesday night. Luke Ayling dropped to the bench. Anthony Dykesdale came in. I think that was partly down to trying to limit the impact that Borja Sainz would have on the game.
Worked a
Uh,
treat, didn't it?
yeah, yeah. What an
No,
absolute.
in in fairness, as much as that sounds really sort of unfair on Anthony Dykesdale, I actually don't think he had that bad of a game. The fact is that Borja Sainz has just hit two absolute worldies, to be honest. And there's certain parts of the goals where you could pick at and be a little bit harsh. The facts are that I think you give me the XG stats before, and I don't even want to get drawn into it. You only have to look at the goals and see that they're just two incredible strikes, to be fair. Michael Carrick even said after the game, if he wanted to be really, really critical, he could be, but sometimes you've kind of just got to say it's two absolute worldies. There's probably more to talk about from a prevention point of view from the third goal. And even then, there's a bit of a kind of discourse around whether it's an absolute clanger or if it's a complete fluke, which I'm sure we'll get onto as well. But Nathan, as you say, Anth comes in on his birthday. Happy birthday, by the way, Dykesdale. And to be fair, Norwich take the lead. It's not great from a defensive perspective. It's a little bit of confusion. Then he basically just whacks it in the top corner. But actually, similarly to Wednesday night, it takes a real scare in the sense of going 1-0 down or nearly going 1-0 down for us to wake up. And from that moment onwards, to be honest, up until the point where Tommy Conway missed the penalty, we were terrific.
Yeah, well, we were really good, but still within that, I'm still going to pick us apart in one instance. Yeah, look, we bounced back very quickly. Azaz had a good effort that the keeper saved on the half volley, turned that around for a corner. But then the corner comes in, gets recycled, goes out to Neto on that left hand side, and he whips a fantastic ball in, and Conway's there unmarked. And I actually don't think he gets the best connection on it, if I'm honest. He just sort of skews a shot goalwards, and obviously from a goalkeeping perspective, they'll be looking at their goalkeeper who gets beat at his near post in this instance. But I kind of feel a little bit sorry for him. Conway's probably about 6 or 7 yards out, and the
It's
shot
yeah,
bouncing at him, and it's a little bit of a sticky one from their perspective, but we'll take that one all day. We'll take that one all day. Gets us back in the game very quickly after going 1-0 down. And I did feel that we needed it. We started very slowly in the game, went 1-0 down, reacted very quickly, and from then on we just sort of took over. The next goal was just fantastic. Ben Doak, it's what he's all about with his pace. Their corner gets cleared. Anthony Dykesdale does fantastically well for this goal. He wins the header that flicks it onto Ben Doak. Doak drives away. I think that Slimani, their midfielder, should just haul him down, really.
ironically enough, he took a yellow card for the exact same thing in the second half, and it was almost as if at half time the Norwich manager's just gone, "Why didn't you drag him down for a yellow card? They're on the counter. He's skipping past you. To end that attack, all you need to do is just drag him by the shirt." And as much as it's frustrating, it's gamesmanship, it's being sensible. I don't know for the life of me why he hasn't just dragged him down.
Yeah, anyway, because Dork is literally like the road runner, he sprints away from him, flicks a ball into the path of Anth, who's marauding forward on the left-hand side. And yeah, he flicks it on into the middle of the pitch, and there's two Boro players. I think it's Conway and Azaz actually, both flying forward. Conway gets there, slots it, and I thought he'd missed in off the post, and yeah, sends us into the lead. And honestly, going into half time or the sort of final 3 minutes of the first half, I'm watching it and I'm thinking, we can get another goal here. We really can. They're there for the taking, and we did have chance after chance. Really, Hackney's efforts saved. Dork comes round and puts the ball across the face of goal. McGree tries to get there, gets his knee on it, and it sort of flicks it slightly ahead of his eyes, but he does well, I think, to just sort of flick his knee at it and comes in off the inside of the post again, goes into the back of the net, 3-1 up at half time. And it was just, yeah, pandemonium, really. You're thinking, finally, we have gone into the first half of a game, had chances and put chances away. It was like a pipe dream. You're hearing murmurs of, oh, Norwich haven't lost at home for nearly a year. It's nearly a year. I think it's a year this week that
It
they've
is. It
lost.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Sammy Silvera and Sam Greenwood, their last defeat, which is strange to say now. But yeah, we were in dreamland, really, weren't we? Ben Doak was just running riot. We've said for weeks now that he's obviously got immense talent in terms of carrying the ball. His 1v1 ability, probably 8 times out of 10, he's going to beat the fullback. And I honestly felt sorry for Callum Doyle. And Callum Doyle's a player that I rate really highly. He's performing in that sort of left back role that's actually an unorthodox centre back for Norwich, same as he did or was intended to at Leicester. He played more of a centre back at Coventry, but we all know the kind of quality that he has in this division, and it looked exactly like what it was. And this isn't to take away from Doak. It was a centre half trying to mark a winger and just looking incredibly uncomfortable. Every time he got the ball, he went past him. There was a period in the first half where Doak just hit a few crosses across the box. He hit one just over the top, and it went all the way over to Borges. And to be honest, you look at that position on the right wing now, and he's got it nailed. I spoke about potentially needing Marcus Force back into the team. That's going to have to be, for me, Marcus Force is going to have to be an impact substitution on the right hand side, which is a conversation in itself in terms of substitutions and how they can impact games. Or he's basically just going to have to hope that he gets a shot up front, because Doak is that sort of dangerous and that much of an impact player in our team that unless he kind of hits a bad run of form, which for a player like Doak, it's probably not going to be a bad run of form. It might just be a few games where he might not kind of get a goal or an assist. But in terms of his threat, it's a persistent threat. He is always going to face up his fullback and be direct. To be honest, he's a joy to watch, especially given the winger that Isaiah Jones has turned into. It's like watching Isaiah Jones, or I'm not putting them in the same category, or Adama Traore. Every time he gets the ball, you know he's going to go at his fullback, and I love watching it. It's the exact reason why, to be honest, what Isaiah Jones has become drives me so mad, because that's what he once upon a time was, and that's why he was getting rave reviews. And for whatever reason, whether it's being coached out of him, I've got no idea. But that's basically the reason why he finds himself on the bench, and he's not going to be getting any minutes anytime soon, really. Again, we'll get onto that a little bit later. But yeah, Doak, fantastic. McGree, fantastic. Azaz and McGree are forming this little bond where that seems to work. look, at the moment, and with the Latte situation, you don't kind of know how that's going to unfold, and if he's going to be back into the team or he'll throw his ties out the pram or what. I don't know. But in terms of the front four, the way it looked on Wednesday, the way it looks today, it's the most complete that we've looked, I feel, in terms of an attacking threat where we will cause teams problems if that is going to be our front four moving forwards. I don't think what's behind has never really been too much of an issue. It's finding the right balance in that front four. And at the moment, it looks like we may have slightly stumbled upon something. It's still very early days, I know that. But even just to score 3 goals in a game is a huge step for us. Because, as you say, we had a lot of chances, but we took a lot of chances as well, or a fair share of those chances. And that, for me, is a huge positive, despite my head still being on Mars as to what unfolded after that point. But, yeah, really, really excellent to see Ben Doak. I mean, the run for the goal, as you say, Dijksteel does phenomenally well for the second goal in terms of just having the head on his shoulders, that level of calm to just actually slot it over to Conway. And like yourself, I thought he'd missed, but it's a good finish again. And yeah, you are in a position going into halftime where you think, look, 3-1 is a dangerous scoreline because always if the team that are losing then gets one back, it's, they're going to throw the kitchen sink at you and it becomes very nervy. And ultimately that's what ended up happening. But you still felt going into that second half that we could quite easily go and score another 3 in the second half. We looked that dangerous at times. Just touching on the first half, from your perspective, I know there was a lot of frustration from the Norwich perspective. Should George Edmondson potentially have got a second yellow?
No,
Dragging Sargent back, was there enough
no,
in that?
no. Sargent is trying to be a proper centre forward, and he knows that Edmondson's on his inside. He knows that that ball's being played over the top, and he's actually backing into him. Edmondson has got his arms around him because as Sargent backs into him, he doesn't want to just get smashed out the way. It's just that's just football. It's never a send off in a million
I think,
years. Lee Hendry on
yeah.
commentary is on a different planet for even suggesting the case.
I'm going to be honest. I did fear the worst a little bit when he got himself into that position. I think from Norwich there is a case of hands over the shoulders a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I think it would have been extremely harsh if he did send him off, but it's by the by. It doesn't happen. We're not a Norwich podcast, so we're not going to kind of dwell on that. Going into the second half, let's just go straight to it. We have a chance of our own. There's sort of a little bit of a ricochet, and then it's one of them where Riley McGree is really clever in the sense he basically knows that Cordoba is drawing his foot back to potentially clear the ball. And Riley McGree just knows all he's got to do is get to the ball first and Cordoba will do the rest. And he does that. He nicks the ball away from him and he bundles him over and you get the penalty. And at that moment, you think, well, we've got a player on a hat-trick. He's already scored a penalty for us. The Bristol City fans seem to want to drill into us when we signed him that he was a penalty merchant. You just think it is literally game over. You never really felt that there was any chance at all that Norwich could possibly come back from a 3-goal deficit. And well, Tommy Conway just gets it all wrong, doesn't he? It's a bad penalty. There's not really much more you can say. He goes for the kind of, it's not quite a Bruno Fernandes or a Jorginho where he's done a little hop, skip and a jump, but he does a little shuffle. And then I think he's kind of hoping that the keeper just is done by his eyes and he basically just rolls it. It's fairly central. The Norwich keeper just completely reads it and makes him look a bit stupid, to be honest. And honestly, it's a terrible thing to say, but given that we touched on it last week, the capitulation element of Middlesbrough, as soon as he missed the penalty, the thought was at the forefront of my mind that this game isn't done. and probably not in terms of a Middlesbrough going and scoring more perspective. They're still alive in this game, and they could quite go and get something out of the game. And to be honest, we'd missed the penalty. As frustrating as it is, ultimately, I'm actually not going to put it down to the penalty miss. Now, if we go 4-1 up, it finishes off the game. That's, in my head, that's crystal clear, and I'm sure it will be in many others. For me, what killed the momentum of the game and killed any threat that we had at all was the substitutions.
I think that you're probably being a bit unfair on the substitutions, really. And I know that sounds strange because I don't agree with them either. But I think that the momentum changes in the game because of the penalty miss. Look, they immediately, pretty much immediately go up the other end and Sainz, okay, yeah, it's not like a complete capitulation from our part and we've gifted them a goal. He's just leathered one in the top corner again, and it's
Yeah,
literally Dieng's even got a hand to it, and it's
yeah,
like it's still in the top corner. I think, yeah, the subs. Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, he's taken Dork off, who's your attacking outlet, who's got bags full of pace, and you replace him with Jones, who, again, look, he's quick. He was once direct. The the thing that's so frustrating is he's no longer direct. He no longer offers you that going forward. What he can offer you is a little bit of defensiveness. He has that within him to sort of track back and help his fullback. But look, we didn't see all too much of that. Even once he come on, there was moments where Sainz skipped past both Dijksteel and Jones and was trying to create chances for Norwich. I think in the other substitution, Latilla coming on for Conway, probably fair enough. Conway sort of ran his race, 70 minutes on the clock. You're hoping that Lath just comes on and gives you energy. And if I'm totally honest, I don't think he did a whole lot at
no,
all.
no, he didn't.
He wasn't effective in any way, shape, or form, really. Didn't run him behind uh, pretty much at all. I can remember one in which he peeled off towards the corner flag, but what was not making runs in behind. Okay, he came short in one instance as we had the ball down their left-hand side, but you're hoping that someone's the focal point. I thought that in the second half, we just look, you mentioned there that we had, or you felt, and we felt that we were going to go on in that second half and we'd still be able to create a lot of chances if we played in a similar manner to the first half. We didn't play in a similar manner to the first half at all. We played very much as we're going to sit in and we'll throw the odd man forward when the ball gets spread out to Doak and try and hope for the best. Really, look, the momentum swung based on the penalty, in my opinion.
I
Yes, the
think
substitutions were
I
wrong, but
do
yeah.
I do just touching on my original point. I do still agree that of course it gives them a boost. Even Conway touched on it after the game and said, "Listen, if I stick the penalty away, it basically wraps up the game." And of course they get that the atmosphere changed. It gives them that boost. But even at that point, when they score, we're still in the lead, and you think, okay, we're under a little bit of pressure here, but if you can just see out 5 minutes, weather the storm a little bit, calm ourselves down, and also what was key for me, and what you're hoping that Isaiah Jones can give you all that laugh is an out, because undoubtedly there's going to be some pressure that you're under, and you need someone like a Doak who, let's kind of go back a few weeks and think about Watford and think about the substitutions which lost us that game, taking off Doak and Hamilton, in fairness to him in that game, threw away that game because we didn't have an out. We invited pressure on from a short spell. And once Watford had got one back, we basically capitulated. Now, it's different today because, you know, as we've touched on, we've got the penalty, we've got the opportunity to seal the game. But with what Isaiah Jones brings you, okay, yes, Michael Carrick's hoping that he brings you some of that directness, some of that, as you say as well, a bit of defensive nous, because we've seen in the West Brom game, he got a lot of praise from his substitute appearance because he was doing the hard yards, he was doing the doubling up on the winger, and he got his plaudits that way. Today, it still felt, because the game was probably a little bit more open, it wasn't so much, we weren't kind of under the cosh as much. It felt like Norwich's 2 goals had been absolute worldies. It's not like they were carving us open. And they did have a really good chance before they got the equaliser. Jones had already been on the pitch at that point. But going back to the initial point, as soon as Doak went off the pitch, we didn't have an out. We were... You said there, and I actually do agree with you to an extent, that we'd not come out for the second half with that same appetite, that same killer instinct, that same drive to go and get the 5th or the 6th. Because genuinely in the first half, I felt that there was an opportunity for us in that game to do that. And not so much because Norwich were absolutely stinking the place out, but because we looked that deadly. The way that we were playing, the intent that we were playing, and the joy that we were having from Doak just constantly going at Doyle, it was relentless. And even just taking our foot off the gas, that 5%, that had an impact. And then when you take Doak off the pitch completely and you bring on someone like Isaiah Jones, now Isaiah Jones has gone through an awful lot, and I don't want to massively single him out, and I hate doing it on the podcast because some people just have bad runs of form, but I'll leave it as his substitute appearance was simply not good enough.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, as you mentioned there, they did have chances before the third. That one that gets played to the substitute that come off the bench. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. He should score, should stick that away. Sainz should probably have one as well. I think that was at 1-3. The ball was played over the top and he volleyed it over the bar. Yeah, okay, a little bit of a difficult one, but I still think for a player of his ability, he should put that one away. Should have 4 on the day, really. We have missed the fact that in the first half, after scoring our second, they should be level
Yeah,
at two.
he
They
does
should
hit
be
the post
they,
as
sh-
well,
they, sh-
doesn't
they
he?
should be level at 2-2. They should be
Yeah.
level at 2-2. And I sort of forgot to touch on that point. In mentioning how good we were in the first half, we still should have conceded 1 in that half-hour period, which just goes to show how sort of leaky we are at times. But yeah, and then apart from that one, the chance from the substitute in which he's knocked it wide, we've conceded 2 worldies and they've scored a cross, which look, I'm gonna discuss this a little bit in my own opinion, which is that Kellen Fisher has got the ball on the right hand side and he's really only got one option in the area, which is Sargent. And I think he's delivering a cross towards that near post where Sargent is, and it's caught Dieng out because he slightly mishit it. It's going in that near post. Dieng actually does get across to make a save. I think even if it doesn't hit his leg, Sargent taps it in.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, just in terms of the cross, it's a complete miscue. There's no way on this planet that Fisher's trying to beat Senny Dieng at his near post. You can see from his body shape and everything that he's, as you say, he's trying to hit Sargent. To be honest, Sargent's not even necessarily making too much of a kind of dart towards the front post. In my mind, it is a complete miscue. If in a different world, if it goes a few inches to the right and it just hits the side netting, the home fans, it gives us a chance to breathe. The home fans go, oh, for God's sake, an opportunity to get it in the box. And we fluff that up. It is a completely miscued cross. And look, I can see both sides again. It's one of them where it doesn't look great on the goalkeeper, but it's also a complete fluke. He hasn't tried to beat Dieng at his near post. Potential questions on positioning, I think that would be a little bit harsh. I think more so the conversation around Dieng at the moment is, other than Callum O'Hare the other night, I can't really remember a save he's made all season. And I know that seems dramatic, or we might just be conceding great strikes. But Dieng, after the conversation around one of the Bristol City goals as well, I know that there's been like a little bit of a conversation around, is he under a little bit of pressure? Is Bryn kind of next in line to go and take his place? I think we're an awfully long way away from that. But the manner in which it goes in, it's not. Look, to be honest, it's a bit of a fluke. I'm going to put it that my expert analysis is just going to put it down to, it's a bit of a fluke. And Seny Dieng, possibly a better keeper, potentially a Premier League goalkeeper, makes that save and manages to keep it out. The reality is Seny Dieng is a championship goalkeeper and he doesn't do enough to keep it out. It's a little bit of a fluke still. My frustration is not from that, though. It's from the general substitutions and lack of intent in the second half. And again, it just feels like points thrown away. And my frustration is still, of course, that penalty miss. Tommy Conway will be sat on the plane or bus or whatever method of transport that
they're already at home, by the way.
Right. Well, so they've obviously flown then, but he'll have sat on that plane tonight and thought, I could have been seat next to me with a signed match ball and 3 points in the bag. And it's largely down to the fact that I've missed a penalty that that's not the case. But there's still so much for Norwich to do. They've still got to score 2 more goals even to get the point. The changes, they haven't done their jobs. It's as simple as that. They've offered nothing. And again, it's a little bit of a sense of, we've just capitulated a little bit. And that, again, worries me, because I know there was, again, you mentioned it last week, and I phrased it in terms of when I posted the podcast of, did Boro lack leadership? And I'm not even sure that was necessarily your point. It was more so just about game management and experience. For me, Howson should have been on minutes before. And I know there's certain conversation around seeing a game out or just winning games in general, that actually leadership is not something that you need. I completely disagree. If you put Johnny Howson on, someone that can retain possession, got an experienced head, will go down. How many times did we talk about in the season where we grinded out results? How many times did Tommy Smith just go down and take his boot off or tie his laces? And what I think sometimes people, because it's not trendy, people fail to realize that actually game management and basically not shitting yourself is actually a really important component of a winning side. And without Howson on the pitch, without Luke Ayling on the pitch, and I'm not saying that they should have started today, but again, on the topic of substitutions, we don't close out the game. We basically, that one goal, it's just like a recurrence of Watford where, and I'm going to be harsh enough to put it down to that, we shit ourselves and we throw away the game, and it's so frustrating. And by all means, I'm happy to, by tomorrow, by Tuesday, maybe it might take me a little bit longer, I'll probably look at this the same as what I've seen a lot of people looking at it from that perspective of, last week's podcast, I was saying, what happens if we get 0 points out of 6? We've come away from 4. And if anyone had offered you that before the Sheffield United game, you'd have snapped the hand off. But you've got to take games for what they are. And today, we could have been finishing this evening in the playoff places with Coventry coming to the Riverside next week and thinking, really good opportunity to win 3 games on the bounce. And now it just feels like it's still a positive result, but it feels like 2 steps back after, or 1 step back after a huge 2 steps forward.
Yeah, I suppose in that sense where it's Look, for Norwich today feels like a win. They've come back from behind, shown immense sort of character to get themselves back into the game. And from a Middlesbrough perspective, it feels a little bit like a defeat because of the way that it's happened. For those players on the way back, they'll feel like they've been beat today because of the way that things have happened, leading 3-1 at half time and having the opportunity to go and wrap up the game and not being able to do so. But for me, and this is very unlike me, I'm sort of just trying to become a little bit more level-headed in my footballing opinions as I become a little bit older and wiser. But the top and bottom of it is we've gone away from home today to a team that haven't been beaten at home for a year. They've been unbeaten in the last 6 games in the championship, shown a good level of consistency on that front. They've got the top goal scorer in the league, who's in the form of his life, who's leathered 2 balls in the top corner past us today, and they've scored a cross as well. And in the first half, we've been able to cut them open at will and put 3 goals past them. And look, it could have been more. It really could have been more. We haven't been able to do so, but I think that this time compared to last week, where we were creating chances and not putting those chances away, not putting teams to bed, I think that had we have played Bristol City today and you go to their place and score 3, it would be game done. They don't have that level of quality from 1 or 2 individual players to be able to just pull them out the shit. Like Borja Sainz today has pulled Norwich out of the shit. They were apart from him, they were a pretty bog standard championship side. I thought Sargent was pretty anonymous today, really. Apart from Sainz, they were a middle of the road championship side. And look, we've come out of this week with 4 points. 3 from a newly relegated side. Look, you spoke and were very sort of complimentary about them, and they've not been able to spend a whole load of money. I'm not having it. They've got an embarrassment of riches in terms of the players that they've got. They've signed loads of players on freeze that will have massive signing on bonuses when I look at their contracts. Players like O'Hare, who's ran his contract down at Coventry to sign on a massive wedge at Sheffield United. Not having it. That they've had no chance to spend money. And we've got a Norwich today who've got, as mentioned, at this moment, the most informed player in the league, and we've conceded 2 absolute worldies and a cross. It's just a case of sometimes when your luck is in, your luck is in. And for Norwich today with that cross especially, it just feels like had that not been Middlesbrough on the Sky scoreboard, that game would have been seen out. It'd have been 4-1, and
That's my point
it'd have
exactly.
been the game done.
Unfortunately, it is Middlesbrough though, Nathan. But yeah, I do see where you're coming from. I think with the mantra of, like we did touch on last week as well, that Middlesbrough are a better side or they pick up their points against the better teams. Norwich are, and to be honest, I do agree with you, they are a little bit of a one-man band at the moment. I know, just speaking in terms of today, they certainly were. Sargent was quiet, but obviously, it might have just been a slightly off day for him. But I think, honestly, and this is probably a bad thing on my part, until we probably go and win 4 or 5 games on the bounce, my mind's just going to go, especially games today, the frustration levels are going to bubble over because of the points that we've already thrown away this season. And
Yeah,
that's a possibly really negative way to think about things. But like I touched on last week, my expectation levels are maybe unjustifiably higher this season. And I'm just waiting for us. There's been an obvious, as I say, as kind of a few hours go by or a couple of days go by, I'll think, right, okay. One element that we've struggled with so much is that we were struggling to put chances away. We've put 3 goals in the back of Norwich's net. We've beaten Sheffield United, but that happens today. And against the better teams, we've potentially been, well, again, we've been, 15, 20 minutes away from 6 points out of 6. And I think, honestly, and again, this may potentially be a mental way of looking at things. I'm looking at next week already and thinking, and not because it's Coventry, but because it's a team near the bottom end of the league at home, and you think, what will this result mean next week if they go and put 10 men behind the ball and we can't break them down and it goes back to that? That might not happen, but I'm almost emotionally, Nathan, I'm too scared to be quite pleased with that. I feel like I'm scarred that, oh, well, it'll just go back to next week where we'll struggle to break a team lower down the division down. And then these points today will be even more frustratingly will have been dropped.
Chris.
It's a continuing theme. I think that's why I'm worried, because it's a continuing theme that we just don't seem to have that, or we haven't developed it yet, which that's what I'm clinging on to as much as I physically can. It might not sound it, Nathan, but we haven't developed that killer instinct yet to get to the positions where we want to be. You look at Sunderland closing games out at the moment, and I'm not saying they're some sort of championship super team, but they're closing games out.
Yeah, look, they are, but less of them. I don't care. But look, I think that we're slowly, and it is very slowly, seeing signs of improvement. But look, on the goal scoring front, we've scored 4 in 2 games this week. Probably should have been 5 with the penalty. And then you don't know what happens from then on if that goal's scored. But yeah, I think you can't necessarily look at that game today and blame the defense necessarily. And I know that sounds incredible. You've conceded 3 goals, but it it's literally 2 absolute rockets that I'm going to be honest. I don't think many keepers are making the saves.
No, it's not even necessarily the goals. I think, to be honest, like I've just touched on, up and when I'll start to get over these types of games is when games like the Preston's derbies in terms of future results, we start to put them behind us. And
Yeah,
up until we do start doing that, each dropped point or 2 points dropped is going to feel more like wasted time more than anything.
yeah. Well, look, as you say there, we've played 2 sides this week up the top end of the championship, and we've done all right, 4 points out of 6. And as you mentioned, now we've got 3 games before the next international break against sides in that bottom half, beginning with our best friends from the West Midlands, Coventry City.
Nathan's got the kit on for anyone that's watching on YouTube.
Yeah, the old sky blue and white. Yeah, those first, QPR following, and then Luton. But then if you look at those in like isolation, rather than looking at those from a league table perspective, Coventry, I'm under no illusion that those pesky bastards are just in a false position constantly. Like they will not start the season until November. Ironically, our game is in November.
I don't know if you've received this message as well, but for those of you that have followed the Boropolis channel for a while, you'll know that we have a mutual acquaintance. He's not a friend in the lead up to a game, But basically, he's Alex, the Coventry fan that's been on this channel before. He done a preview 2 or 3 years ago now, I think. One of my friends from university. So that's why we're kind of aware of Coventry. And it's basically become this burden that we've just got in both of our lives and we can't seem to shake it off. But this was a message that I received off him earlier today. Let me find it. As the saying goes, Cov go forward when the clocks go back.
And it's so true.
And it is frighteningly true, Nathan, as you were just about to touch on.
Yeah. And look, it's just horrifically typical that they look to have turned a corner, and ironically against a side that we're going to be playing in a couple of weeks in Luton. But yeah, my point being, the three teams that we're playing against, Coventry, they've got quality. QPR, it's a difficult place to go. I don't. We haven't got the best record there. Okay, we won there last year, but it's not the best record.
They haven't
Um,
they haven't got Chris Willock and Lyndon Dykes anymore though, so
yeah, that is a bonus, I suppose. And then obviously Luton at home as the final game before the team just come out of the Premier League, and yeah, they've got dangerous players. These teams, especially the Coventry and Luton, I don't think that either of those sides will be in any danger of being in and around that bottom end of the table come May. But yeah, we'll preview that lot now because they are next up, and we'll be discussing what unfolds next Saturday at the Riverside, a week today. As mentioned, it looks like they've turned a corner. They've been absolutely diabolical up until this weekend. And look, you watched the game, Chris. I was at work. I was following the game from work. They go 2-0 down before half time. We have Alex on the phone saying that this feels like an end of an era for Robins. And as mentioned, the pesky bastards just pull something out the bag and they scam the way to a last minute winner.
yeah. Yeah. Do you know what? In fairness to Coventry, it wasn't a case of, as Nathan described it, a scam. The 2-0 deficit that they were down in the first half was actually probably a little bit misleading. In fairness, they had a bucket load of chances in the first half, and as you say, they have got quality. They've got, as some would describe him, the best midfielder in the division in Ben Sheaf. I mean, that's up for debate. He is a great player. I'm not disputing that, but there's also other great midfielders in this division. And then their forward line, I mean, plucky old Coventry. By no means am I poking fun at them because it'll only come back and bite me in the arse. But they've got a forward line that probably is one of the most expensive forward lines in the division. They spent a decent sum of money on Ellis Sims. They spent a decent sum of money on Haji Wright. Of course, they brought in Thomas Asante, who hasn't actually played all too much. Mason Clark as well, they brought in, who hasn't even been getting on the pitch, which is a shock in terms of what everyone thought he was going to offer. Sakamoto is back from injury. There's loads of names in that Coventry team where you think, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and rightfully so, I think I probably did. In fact, I know I did, predicted them to be their year where they'd go that kind of one step further and they'd be in and amongst, definitely in the playoffs and potentially pushing on the higher echelons of the division. Now, at the moment, they haven't been able to do so, but they have this knack, as they showed on Saturday, where from the depths of despair, they managed to, like some sort of 80s horror film, a hand just appears out of the dirt and almost kind of claws them back into a position where in about, let's say, 8 weeks' time, you'll look over your shoulder and think, how on earth are they there? And they'll be right up our backsides from almost nowhere. You can almost guarantee it. But in terms of just again touching on the quality that they've got, they have players that, to be honest, would get in most championship squads, at least, if not teams. I'm under no illusions that their position currently is a little bit of a false sense of security. I don't know the ins and outs of why it's happened. I know they've made changes on their backroom staff, which a lot of Coventry fans are unhappy about. And there was a certain member of the backroom staff, I think the assistant manager, that left, and then they've now kind of, instead of replacing him individually, they've added 3 or 4 sort of additional members of the backroom staff. And I honestly don't know the ins and outs, but it does feel like that win yesterday probably couldn't have come at a worse time, in the sense that you do feel now that they're going to come to the Riverside and think, is this the beginning of our annual, we're about to not lose a game for 10 weeks, and then all of a sudden they'll be in the mix again. They have that about them. And let's put it brutally as it is. And it's not something that bears any data or any sort of, to be honest, real bearing on the 2 sets of players that are going to go up against each other on Saturday. But like Bristol City, whether you like it or not, historically, Coventry have become a bogey side for Middlesbrough. And it sounds ridiculous, but there's almost a mental aspect of getting over that, because those scores from that playoff game, and even the game before that, and even the multiple pastings that we've taken at the CBS, it will feel like quite a big moment if Michael Carrick's side go out and put a performance and dispatch of Coventry, because normally when you kind of put these little hoodoos to bed, historically it's a good sign in a season. And to be honest, if we can do that, I won't even make one negative comment at all next week, Nathan, because I'll be absolutely over the moon.
The top and bottom of it is that so far in his managerial career, Mark Robins has had Michael Carrick's number every single time. And he even had it 3 times in the space of 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Right,
he did.
right. Now, my key question for next week, and it's a big one. Can Ben Doak pass the Jake Bidwell litmus test?
To be honest, I don't know. Because if we're honest, we've seen what it can do to people. What is more interesting, Nathan, and I think you've missed the boat a little bit on this, is can the American boy and Hayden Hackney pass the Mark Robins box midfield litmus test?
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's a game where a couple of years ago I wouldn't have cared. But now it feels like there's a little bit of added spice to the game because of those playoff games and other things. But yeah, it'll be a massive game now, especially considering that they've suddenly turned a corner and look like a football team again. Yeah, it's massive, and it'll be really interesting to see how the game goes itself. Yeah, anyway, I think that's enough ramble about Coventry. It's a big game, and I'm going to be honest, I'm totally not looking forward to it.
Nathan, here's a question for you. Is Halloween... No, so Halloween falls before the Coventry game.
Hmm.
To just take our minds off what unfolded this afternoon and the potential of Coventry, I'm going to give you 3 players to finish up on. And I just want you to tell me from the Borough squad or coaching staff what you think their Halloween costume is going to be.
Well, I think that Aidan Morris would go all out because he's American.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, to be honest, he absolutely... There's a Chucky costume there
Yeah, yeah,
screaming his name.
Yeah, I think George Edmondson would be a pumpkin.
What's brought you to that conclusion?
I just think he's got the body type for it. I think
Right,
big fridge.
right.
Um,
Is there
and
any
then
is there any other real sort of standouts that you think?
uh, you've proper got me on the spot here. I think that I'd say that Matt Clark.
Do you know what? Do you know what? In fact, if you've seen Halloween, although he's got a mask on, that boiler suit that he wears, and he's like almost indestructible. Like he'll get hit by a door that's on fire, and then he just kind of leans up like the Undertaker. I think Matt Clark's got that in his locker.
I think Matt Clark has a look of Trevor from Grand Theft Auto in him. I actually really do. So I think
Yeah,
someone like that as like a boiler suit heist type figure, he
yeah,
he could pull it off.
yeah, yeah. And lastly, I'm going to go with one more, just because this has become more of a therapy session. Just getting our mind off the thought of Coventry and that penalty miss more than anything. So if you've turned off now, then by all means, it makes complete sense. Lastly, I'm going to go with, and he hasn't been around for a little bit, so we are missing him. Alex Gilbert, because I think honestly, from just judging off his Instagram alone, he absolutely lives for a Halloween party, doesn't he? You know he does.
He's a I can already tell what you're gonna say.
Go on.
Prisoner.
Yeah. And you know exactly why he goes as a prisoner as well. I'll leave that up to everyone else's imagination. Do you know what, Nathan? That has actually put a smile on my face, and I wish we'd done that first so that I would have been in a slightly better mood when talking about the capitulation at Norwich. But that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast. Happy Halloween for anyone that is into that kind of thing. Never really been a big fan myself, but what I am a fan of is the sort of grab bags of like Twixes and Mars bars and stuff, which have wormed the way into the Cassidy household, just in the cupboards. I don't know if you ever have this where your mum or your dad will like put a bag of chocolate in there and say it's for the kids for Halloween. Don't touch it. 3 days later, it's gone. That's kind of what's basically unfolded in my house today. But yeah, enjoy trick or treating if you're going out. By all means, I don't think the Middlesbrough players will be going out, given that it's so close to a game. But maybe they might sneak a Halloween party in on Saturday night if they get 3 points. I'd like to think so, just to put our theories to the test about what they have on offer. But yeah, Nathan, unless you've got any more Borough Halloween costume ideas to add to, then I think that's us done for this week.
Yeah, I think it is. Me and Alex Gilbert will be off to Creeps on Thursday. So
But he's injured actually, so it's there's not that responsibility there. So I'm sure if you shot him a DM on Instagram, he'd be bang up for that. So let us know if you're successful with kind of getting a night out with Gilbert.
I will do. I will do. I think it's on the cards.
It could be. It could be. Right. As I say, we really have waffled at the end of this podcast, but it's been a funny one. So I hope you've enjoyed our random rantings of potentially two men that have completely lost their marbles, just purely down to the fact that they support Middlesbrough. But yes, that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast. As always, if you've watched on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. If you follow on audio platforms, give us a rating and a review. It does, I believe, help other Borough fans potentially find us and listen to the podcast. But Nathan, I won't bore you with any more Borough Halloween costumes. I'll let you go and enjoy your evening, and you can get on with getting that night out sorted with Gilbert. Thanks ever so much, everyone, for watching and listening. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.